Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, Israel steps up its war against Hamas, preparing to take over 75% of Gaza in the next 2 months. That development comes as Israel and the United States are deciding what to do next about Iran. A sad note here in the U.S. Phil Robertson, the star of the famous Duck Dynasty television series, has died at the age of 79. We're going to bring you his story. The Senate takes up what President Donald Trump calls his big, beautiful bill on tax cuts and spending. But some Republican senators are worried the measure spends too much. And our special stories for Memorial Day as we take a look back at two critical battles from World War II and the sacrifices soldiers made so people throughout the world could be free. All those stories and more today on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin this Memorial Day in the Middle East, where Israel says it is planning to capture 75% of Gaza within 2 months. The move is part of Israel's ongoing offensive against Hamas. Israel already controls 40% of Gaza after launching its latest round of attacks a little more than 2 months ago. The Israeli Defense Forces believe defeating Hamas would lead to the release of the remaining living hostages. Meanwhile, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is in Israel today. The visit is a show of solidarity between the two nations after the murder of 2 Israeli embassy employees in Washington, D.C. last week. Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram died at the hands of a gunman who reportedly told police he did it for Palestine. Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell is joining us now from Jerusalem. So, Chris, what more can you tell us about the goals for the move to capture 75% of Gaza in 2 months or so?
Well, Ephraim, this operation called Gideon's Chariots is massive. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of reservists that have been called up to go ahead and clear and control land, unlike they had done since October 7th, which is more special operations. This effort is to squeeze Hamas into smaller and smaller areas, all the while providing humanitarian free zones for the population in Gaza. There's 3 that they will be setting up. The idea is to be able to move the population there so they could be, first of all, out of the hands of Hamas, using them as human shields, and also removing the humanitarian aid from Hamas's ability to go ahead and steal that aid and then sell it on the black market. That's a way that Hamas has been using for many, many months to be able to fund its war machine. So this effort, hopefully, as you said, hopefully in 2 months, they'll be able to control 75% of Gaza and control that land. And then hopefully that will lead to the defeat of Hamas and its military infrastructure, and for the release of the 58 remaining hostages, 20 of those that are still alive.
All right, let's turn now to Iran. President Trump is sounding optimistic about the U.S. nuclear talks with Iran, but others aren't so sure. What is the thinking there in Israel? And perhaps a bigger question, is a strike on Iran still possible?
Yeah, that's right. That's the big question right here, Ephraim. And mixed messages coming. Some people are saying there's pessimistic about the talks. And as you said, President Trump says he seems optimistic about the talks. The real key issue right now, Ephraim, is enriching uranium. Iran says that it has a national right to enrich uranium. And the position right now of the Trump administration is that they want to dismantle and destroy Iran's enrichment infrastructure. And so those are 2 diametrically opposed positions. And right now that leaves Israel watching and waiting to see how these negotiations are going to turn out. But we know that the IDF is ready, if necessary. As some people say, it has its finger on the figurative trigger right now, and just waiting to see how these talks come out, and then waiting and to see if they have to go ahead and strike them, these Iranian nuclear strikes independently of the United States, or perhaps be a joint operation with the Israel and the United States. But right now, Benjamin Netanyahu is adamant, and he has been. This has been his sort of raison d'etre, his reason for being for many, many years, to make sure that Iran does not get a nuclear weapon.
Chris, yesterday was the funeral of Yaron Lashinsky. What has been the reaction there in Israel in the last few days to those murders of Israeli embassy staffers in Washington?
Well, Ephraim, I had the opportunity to attend that funeral. It was just outside of Jerusalem in a moshav called Bet Zayit, where Yaron had lived and with his family grew up there after he had moved. His family had moved from Argentina here to Israel. A very, very sad moment. Hundreds of people gathered in there. Israelis in general are shocked, like everybody is. Yaron, from all accounts, would just said just a stellar young man, and many of the people that were there just were lauding what kind of a life he lived. And he was sadly buried there in that community. The Israeli foreign minister was there. The deputy foreign minister was there, and also there, Ephraim. He was what they call a messianic believer. He believed in Yeshua, and his faith was on demonstration there, where people said, that's really what he lived for, was his faith in Yeshua, or as some people call him, Jesus in English.
U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is there in Israel. What can you tell us about her visit?
Well, she came last night to the Western Wall. I had the opportunity to see her there, as well as Ambassador Mike Huckabee. She went to the women's section of the wall, along with Ambassador Huckabee's wife, Janet, where she prayed and put a note in the wall there. Last night, she met with Prime Minister Netanyahu, along with the ambassador, presumably talking about the security situation. Today, she had a service with the Israeli foreign minister, a memorial service on behalf of Yaron and Sarah.
Last question for you. Today is, of course, a holiday in the U.S. It's also a big day there in Jerusalem. What can you tell us about the national holiday?
Well, Jerusalem Day, it commemorates the liberation of Jerusalem in the 1967 Six-Day War. For the first time in more than 2,000 years, the Jewish people were in control of the Temple Mount. There's a famous saying at that time. Colonel Monte Moore said, "The Temple Mount is in our hands. The Temple Mount is in our hands." It reverberated throughout the Jewish world. It was a major historic milestone and a prophetic milestone that many say. The late Pat Robertson used to say that this was a really key moment in prophecy unfolding when the Jewish people controlled the Temple Mount and the city of Jerusalem for the first time in more than 2,000 years.
All right, Jerusalem Day in Israel. Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thank you so much for your insights. We look forward to hearing from you in the days ahead this week. Here at home, a sad story to report today. Phil Robertson, the star of the Duck Dynasty television series and patriarch of the Robertson family, died Sunday at the age of 79. The family announcing the news on Facebook, saying, "We celebrate today that our father, husband, and grandfather, Phil Robertson, is now with the Lord." In recent months, the family revealed he suffered from a blood disorder similar to a form of cancer. Phil Robertson often shared his testimony of God's redeeming grace in his life, inspiring fans to embrace the gospel and to be baptized. Coming up, the Senate is getting ready to take up the president's big tax cut and budget bill, having barely passed the House, but some Republicans are worried the measure doesn't go far enough to cut spending. We'll have that story for you when we come back. You're watching CBN NewsWatch.
Introducing a brand new way to start your morning, the CBN News Quick Start Podcast. Each weekday morning at 7 a.m., get quick highlights of the day's important news. Then an in-depth analysis that goes beyond the headlines. Insights that matter to people of faith. Discover how God is moving around the world and here at home. Find the CBN News Quick Start Podcast on iTunes or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts, because truth matters.
President Trump calls the tax and budget measure that passed the House last week his, quote, big, beautiful bill, but it's headed for a rude reception in the Senate this week from some Republicans unhappy that it doesn't cut enough federal spending, and others are concerned from both parties. CBN's Dale Hurd is on the story.
The president's mega bill only passed the House by one vote and faces more GOP opposition in the Senate. Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson, who calls it the Titanic, says the bill is going down because it doesn't cut enough from the federal budget.
The only number we ever heard about was $1.5 trillion, which sounds like a lot, but it's only $150 billion per year. This year we'll spend over $7 trillion. $150 billion on that is basically a rounding error.
It also faces Democratic opposition over cuts to food assistance and Medicaid. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson's response, they're doing the best they can.
We've got to turn this aircraft carrier. You don't turn an aircraft carrier on a dime. It takes a mile of open ocean to do it. And it took us decades to get in this financial situation. We can't just flip a switch and get out of it overnight.
The so-called Big Beautiful Bill would extend President Trump's 2017 tax cut, lift the federal income tax on tips and overtime work, and give $50 billion to resume construction of the border wall. Meanwhile, President Trump has announced he'll delay his proposed 50% tariff on imports from the European Union. The tariffs were set to begin this Sunday, but Trump has pushed them back to July after a conversation with European Commission head Ursula von der Leyen.
She just called me, as you know, and she said she wants to get down to serious negotiation.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Still ahead, we're going to bring you two stories this Memorial Day, looking back on the sacrifices made in key battles in World War II. So much of the world could live in freedom. We're going to bring you those stories when we come back. Today, we honor the fallen and the families who carry their legacy. We have two stories on key battles that turned the tide of World War II, now more than 80 years ago. We begin with D-Day with our first report from CBN contributor Chuck Holton, a former Army Ranger himself. He visited Normandy to bring us this look at the enduring legacy of the greatest generation who fought and died for freedom.
To say that it's sobering to walk among the graves of these more than 9,000 Americans who gave their lives back in 1944 here at Normandy Beach is the height of understatement. But it makes me think not just of the lives and the futures that these people gave up, but the fact that they gave them not just to liberate America, but to bring the ideal of America to another continent.
On June 6, 1944, the course of world history changed as Allied forces launched a massive invasion on the beaches of Normandy. Among thousands of brave soldiers who risked everything that day was Tech Sergeant Charles Leonard Jones, whose story of courage and sacrifice is being brought to light by his great-nephew, Mark Tomlin.
My grandma remembers when he was right before he left for war. She was about 4 years old, and he would play catch with her and roll the ball back and forth. And she has a vivid memory of him smiling and laughing before he left. And that was the last time she ever saw him.
Tech Sergeant Jones survived the initial assault on D-Day only to be killed in action on July 4th. Tomlin is the first of his family to visit Jones' grave, making this a deeply personal journey to honor his great-uncle's sacrifice.
He made it almost a month after landing here on D-Day. His father found out what had happened one day when they came with the flags and he saw them outside. He just knew that his son was dead.
If the invasion was going to be a success on June 6, 1944, the 2nd and 5th Ranger Battalions had to take these cliffs here at Pointe du Hoc. It fell to them because they're the premier light infantry unit in the U.S. military. And they were going to have to fire ropes up these 150-foot cliffs, climb up hand over hand, under fire, and take these coastal defense batteries. And so the commander of the 29th Infantry Division, Brigadier General Cota, wanted to give the Rangers some encouragement before they embarked on their mission. So he came to the lead element of the 5th Ranger Battalion and said, "What unit is this?" And they said, "It's the Rangers, sir." And he said, "Well, then, Rangers, lead the way." That became the official motto for the 75th Ranger Regiment that's still used by the Army Rangers even to this day.
There's a level of responsibility you feel to carry on for what he died for.
As the number of living D-Day veterans dwindles, thousands gather to commemorate this pivotal moment in history and reflect on the challenges the world faces today. Stories of veterans like Tech Sergeant Jones serve as an important reminder of the high cost of freedom and the unwavering spirit of those who fought to defend it. From the hallowed grounds of Normandy, France, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
80 years ago, U.S. Marines launched one of the most brutal and iconic assaults of World War II on the remote Pacific island of Iwo Jima. Today, veterans return to honor the fallen and remember the horrors they endured. Here again is Chuck Holton with the story from Iwo Jima.
In February 1945, nearly 70,000 U.S. Marines landed on the tiny volcanic island of Iwo Jima. What they encountered was unlike anything they'd faced before.
Enemy fire keeps us pinned down. We want to pull the beach over our heads like a blanket.
An enemy they couldn't see, a battlefield designed to kill, and a fight that would test every ounce of courage.
It was tough going. Many didn't make it.
Anything they had, they were shooting. Shovels, they were fighting with shovels. They were fighting with rocks. They were fighting with their guns, anything that they had. It was just a melee.
The Japanese defenders had turned the island itself into a weapon, fortifying it with hidden strongholds and miles of tunnels, all part of a deadly strategy that made every inch of ground a fight to the death.
Oftentimes, the United States service members never saw a Japanese person. So it is an odd battle for us. The Japanese at this time of the war were using a thing called fukaku in Japanese, which is defense in depth.
When the Marines landed on Iwo Jima, most of them didn't see a whole lot of enemy soldiers. That's because there weren't many of them in the open. Even though there were 22,000 to 23,000 enemy troops on the island, they weren't on the island so much as in the island. That's because they were in caves like this one. They had dug almost 11 miles of caves, some of them as many as 7 stories tall, under Mount Suribachi. And that's why when they dropped the bombs on the island and threw artillery at it, they really didn't kill too many of the enemy troops because they were all safely underground.
Amid the chaos and carnage, a single iconic moment gave the nation hope.
Suribachi is ours, a toehold on the southern tip of the island.
A lot of people talk about the flag raising, which happened on the 4th day, like that's the culmination of the battle, when in reality it was just the very beginning of the battle. It is an island that saw 6,821 Americans killed.
I didn't know what to think. I mean, they told us not to get real too happy over the thing. The war wasn't over. It wasn't over at all. We were going to have to push to the other end of the island.
I cried. To see Old Glory up there on that hill, God, that was something else. You can't believe that.
I was on the airstrip, and I just happened to look, and the flag went up. And I said to the guy, look, the flag come up, you know. And I like the other guy said a lot of clapping. I didn't hear no clapping. All we said is about time, you know.
The Japanese defenders held out almost to the last man.
They knew they were going to die. There was no going home from Iwo Jima. Every single man on that island knew that this was the end, and they fought accordingly.
From their fortified positions on Mount Suribachi, the Japs looked right down our throats.
Red Beach is quiet and peaceful today, but on that day, the day of the invasion, it was nothing but blood and chaos and courage up and down this beach as far as you can see. The men who landed here did so with very little hope of ever getting home unscathed. And you have to think about the high value they must have placed on what they were doing to continue to charge this beach, even over the bodies of the 566 men who died here on the first day alone.
Wreckage along the beach was only a small part of the cost of 26 days of fighting. We stacked the helmets of our dead in neat piles.
More Americans died on Iwo Jima than in any other Pacific battle. But the lessons learned here would shape the future of warfare and medicine for decades to come.
To put this in perspective, we spent 10-odd years in Iraq, 14, 15 years in Afghanistan. Combined in that period, we lost less men than we lost on the island of Iwo Jima in 36 days. That's a frightening statistic. But it also is an amazing statistic telling you the advances in military medicine, telling you the advances in tactics and strategy. We learned the lessons from this battle and continue to teach them in our war colleges.
For many who served on bloody Iwo, the memories are carved deeper than the island's caves, and the cost of victory still echoes today.
My daughter-in-law says to me, why are they always honoring you for? I said, not honoring me, they honor the service. The real people that should be honored, the people in the ground. I said, those are the heroes, not the ones that came back.
8 decades later, the youngest of the veterans who survived Iwo Jima are now in their late 90s, so few remain. This may be the last year any of them are able to return, to walk these beaches once more and honor the comrades they left behind. From the hallowed ground of Iwo...
We'll be right back with an encouraging word for your day. Stay with us. You're watching CBN NewsWatch.
Download the CBN News app, 24/7 news from a Christian perspective at home or on the road. One place for all of your news. Breaking news alerts. Set daily prayer goals and pray for news stories. Read the most important news and watch CBN News Channel live. CBN News, because truth matters. Go to cbnnewsapp.com to get the app today.
Hi, I'm John Stolnis, host of the CBN News podcast, DC Debrief. Each Friday, get the inside scoop on Washington politics straight from the nation's capital. Because truth matters. Start listening today.
Time now for your Monday motivation, and today I leave you with this thought as we begin another week. Cast a vision, write it down, and take steps to make it a reality. But know this, God is the one who determines what happens, when it happens, and how it happens. Submit your will to His way. The Creator knows the plans He's designed for His creation. There is no true purpose or true plan without Him. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel. You can find them there at any time as well as online. That address is cbnnews.com. We'd also love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. We look forward to seeing you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye. God bless. Thanks for watching.